Okay, so like I mentioned in my email, I think I have all of the objects working correctly now. Something about the way they were built clearly was messing with the way the XR rig was interpreting their position and the collision. So I got rid of all of the capsule colliders on the um, pneumatic wrench here, and also on the jack. And you can see, I can reach out and grab that. And that it doesn't seem to be, acting crazy. I can bring it in pretty close to me, and you can see I can grab it, and it's, reasonably stable. I mean, there's still some little things that you might have to work through to make the experience a little easier or smoother. One of the things that I messed with was the rigid body mass of each of the items so that they had a little more relative mass to each other. You can still see that there's some weird sort of physics behaviors. And again, that could just be because, when it tries to apply that rigid body mass, it's just trying to apply it to like the center of gravity. So you could manipulate that a little bit further by going into the rigid body and adjusting some of the settings, right? So um, the mass being one, and then you can actually set the center of gravity differently. So like right now the center of gravity is probably um, kind of taking into account the colliders. So that's probably why it's tipping forward like that, which is kind of what you want. But if you wanted to, you could adjust that to be a little bit lower, things of that nature that maybe balance it out a bit better. But you could see that I made the weight of the gun relative um, to the jack here a little bit different. And the same thing with the tire. The tire is significantly heavier than both the jack and the wheel gun. But you can also see that when I take something that's heavier and try to hit it against, say, something that's even heavier than it doesn't really like smack it off into infinity. Um, Whereas like something like this box is very light, so if I touch it even just like a little bit, it'll go like launching off the screen. Whereas this tire, I can kind of hit it reasonably hard, or quick, and the force is relative to the individual mass. So that's like still a little unrealistic, but again, you could kind of play around with that and do some research on maybe how to get these things to be a little bit more realistic if you wanted. I think the hard part will be, you know, if you're not using sockets or if you're not using um, some scripting to try and control the way that these, collide or interact with each other. It's not a perfect physics engine. So, doing something like what you would expect in the real world to, say pick something up, um, you know, isn't quite like what you would get from this. So like I can't just like scoop this up, in an easy way. So, what you might need to do is kind of like what you did with the socket collider on the car, is use some sort of script and detect, oh, if I'm near a tire, let's say, and I'm trying to scoop it up with the jack, detect that impending collision and then tell the system to like, essentially like lift the tire and put it on the jack. Or if you're putting the jack under the car, use the socket. Once the socket's interacted, lift the car. Same thing with like the wheel gun, right? You might come over to the tire, and then once you have the wheel gun in your hand and you pull the trigger, maybe it makes a noise, and you get this sort of pneumatic wrench sound, and you do that a couple times, and then suddenly the tire is able to be grabbed, right? And then you grab the tire off. And even that, you could probably use the socket. So you could have a socket set up with the tire already attached to it, and then essentially disable the socket temporarily, until you do the wheel gun on it. And then once you've done the wheel gun on it, you sort of re-enable the socket, allowing you to grab the wheel off. And same thing for putting a new wheel on. You could basically put the new wheel on. You use the wheel gun to, again, attach, notionally the bolts, and then once you've done it, however many times you're supposed to do it, that socket should disable, and when you go to grab the tire, it's no longer grabbable. So do some research on the scripting. I think you should be able to kind of follow the instructions in my email, or rebuild these objects in Blender and bring them in. That should really only take you maybe a day or two to kind of figure out how to get that working properly. And then I would really focus the rest of your week on trying to come up with scripts and things that, again, either help facilitate the interaction so that, when you go to use the jack and pick something up, that you can see that the object kind of sort of snaps onto the jack, or that if you're using the jack to lift the car, that once you put it in the socket, it lifts, and then when you use the wheel gun, that you have to do something, maybe you count the number of times or you maybe have some specific points that they're supposed to, use the wheel gun on. Focus on those kind of features, because those are what are really going to take your particular project to the next level. What you have right now is pretty good. And I think if you fix those small problems that we were observing last night, you'll get a really good grade, because I think you've put a lot of work into like building out the level, and you have a good concept for the experience. But I think if you really wanted to get like an A+ kind of, or the maximum amount out of your grade, I would focus on cleaning up some of those interactions, making sure that they're nice and tight, and that they have some logic to it. So like, again, being able to walk up to the wheel, have it sort of indicate that you're supposed to interact with the wheel gun in 2 or 3 different locations. Once you've done those 2 or 3 interactions, the wheel sort of unlocks, you're able to grab it, that kind of thing. So that would be where I would focus my attention once you get all of the other stuff working. And then the only other thing I would probably do, just so that you maybe don't have to worry quite as much about the project breaking, would be, once you have these objects reasonably working the way you think you want them to, and they're not like freaking out like they were the other night, just get rid of any of the miscellaneous ones that you don't need. If there's a wheel gun that you use as part of the tutorial, but you're not really going to use that specific version of it as your main wheel gun, just get rid of it. You don't need all those additional objects and cluttering up the scene and potentially breaking your interactions. I do want to see those objects from the tutorials, so like use the color affordance, use the audio affordance, use those techniques as part of your objects. Don't just do like the real basic game object. Make sure you're taking advantage of those like feedback and other interaction capabilities that we've kind of gone over, and you should be good to go.